Hollywood loves adapting books into movies, which only makes perfect sense. There's already an existing fan base and an outline for the script to follow. Piece of cake, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't always make for good movies, as the strengths of one medium don't always carry over into another. While there are plenty of bad books that make for bad movies, the real tragedy is when a great book is adapted into a mockery of the source material. From grim and complex works that were turned into brain-dead action flicks to children's books turned into sleazy comedies, here are great books that were ruined by terrible movies. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Alan Moore is rightly considered one of the best comic book writers of all time, and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is a perfect example of why. Following a group of some of the most famous figures in literary history, the series is a densely constructed work that belies its obvious high concept. Moore has frequently been outspoken about his distaste for adaptations of his work in general, but The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is in a league of its own. On the positive side, The League was directed by Stephen Norrington a few years after he'd helmed Blade, and it starred Sean Connery as Alan Quatermain. Unfortunately, that's about the last of its positive qualities. Connery cost so much that nearly everyone else in the cast was a no-name actor, and the script deviated significantly from the comic. Even worse was the addition of Tom Sawyer supposedly to excite American audiences. But Americans were not excited to see the film, nor was anyone else. It was such a disaster that Connery retired from acting and Norrington announced his decision to quit Hollywood. Gulliver's Travels. In the realm of satire, Jonathan Swift is an old-school, over-the-top master of genius parody. So when adapting his work, you should probably select a lead actor whose subtlety feeling is unrivaled. Jack Black, despite his many positives, is not that actor, and casting him in the lead role of 2010's Gulliver's Travels is only one of the many mistakes this movie makes. The film retains almost none of the book's clever writing and winking references, instead relying on outlandish performances and easy jokes. Despite negative reviews, the worldwide box office was actually decent. Unfortunately, that probably now means that Jack Black putting out a raging fire with his urine is the only frame of reference many people have for Swift's best work. Valérian and Laureline. While there are plenty of poorly made adaptations by filmmakers who couldn't care less about the source material, passion projects can turn out just as badly. That's what happened with Luc Besson's Valérian and the City of a Thousand Planets, an adaptation of the long-running classic French sci-fi comic Valérian and Laureline. Besson had been a fan of the comic for years, and its influence on his filmography is obvious. But his Valérian adaptation stripped away the comic's sly style and replaced it with a sloppy, poorly paced roller coaster ride. While the visuals are beautiful, leads Dane DeHaan and Cara Delevingne delivered wooden performances that seemed more like auditions than a final cut. Critics were harsh, and the box office was so underwhelming that it's unlikely we'll ever get a sequel. The Giver. The best adaptations understand that any changes from the source material should be made for the good of the new medium. But the makers of 2014's The Giver may have gone a little overboard when switching things up. The novel follows a 12-year-old boy named Jonas who becomes the receptacle for all of his society's repressed memories and emotions. It's a slow burn that's heavy with symbolism and a largely internal conflict with very little action. But the movie ages Jonas up to 16, gives him a love interest, and sprints from plot point to plot point with manic pacing. The intent might have been to keep audiences from getting bored by weighty conversations and internal monologues, but the end result is a movie that looks identical to all the other dystopian young adult franchises.
We need sameness, don't you think?
Oh, I completely agree. And still, it's also beautiful.
Eragon. Following a young farm boy who hatches a dragon from an egg, Eragon was a massively popular novel. Fans thrilled to the detailed maps and complicated relationships between various factions. Unfortunately, anyone hoping for an adaptation on the level of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy was disappointed by the 2006 film version. The movie had to condense a ludicrous amount of plot to fit the running time. Fans of the book were furious at what was left out, while unknowing audiences were just plain confused. It was critically savaged in a box office disappointment, and what could have been the start of a new fantasy franchise ended up instead just a forgettable one-off. The Cat in the Hat. There's arguably no greater children's author than Dr. Seuss, whose books feature iconic artwork and a uniquely playful vocabulary. His work manages to be timeless because it truly is for all ages. Subtlety ought to be the name of the game when adapting Dr. Seuss, but 2003's The Cat in the Hat is anything but subtle. Starring Mike Myers as the title troublemaker, the humor is crude and vulgar, resembling Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas more than classic children's literature.
He made a mess in the house, that's why they sent him to a vet to cut off both his boo. Boo. Boy!
The set design does mirror Seuss's style, but what looks fun on paper becomes garish and unsettling in live action. The critical consensus was decidedly negative, and all the disturbing innuendo still haunts viewers' dreams.